All right, we have a pretty big week ahead of us. We're going to do a rundown of the broad market. I'm not going to do too much day trading stuff, short-term trading right now. You already know my plan if you watched the video from Friday, but we have some important things I want to talk about and some upgrades we're making to the channel. Also, the Nasdaq 100, SP 500, let's break it down. Now, as we get in here, I do want to highlight some of the upgrades I am making. I have actually made the switch off of Cheddar Flow, and I don't want this to be like a money grab. I'm not even having an affiliate link down because I'm not affiliated with them. And I did make the payment, as you can see here. You can see the nice $400 payment for 3 months. I'll be switching over to these guys and using them. Just better data overall. I've been meaning to do this switch, and you're going to get more information here. I've had a lot of questions about specifically, am I going to be using, order flow? And y'all have obviously seen that not being in the videos lately, so I want to, target that first. Now, when we talk about the broad market, we've talked about how we moved basically on Friday, specifically with Thursday being a bulk of that movement. Now, if you don't know, it was a bank holiday going into Friday, so I suspected less overall volume. And if you really look at what happened with volume, it's pretty interesting, the fact that we didn't slow down all that much. And again, I like to use Yahoo Finances because it's extremely simple and I can just show you how to do it for yourself. This is the best way to get a broad sense of volume. I don't like the Qs as much, even though I chart most of the things on Nasdaq. SPY is going to get typically the most influential volume, if you will. So I just like to see this on a scale of what's happening on the day, and I believe SPY is traded more often than Qs also. But if you consider the past 30 days, I believe the average is around 101 million, 102 million, roughly 30-day volume. Even with it being a bank holiday, you still pulled in around 93, 94 million in volume. The day before that, for instance, you were about 40% over the standard, but you still kind of came in at a 30-day average. If you compare that to the previous days before CPI, you had declining volume, even to the upside. So I do want to highlight that's what happened going in on Friday. And again, this is not a video to highlight the short term, but just the overall trend, because I believe in my latest videos I may seem overly bullish, but I want to address key things we need to be looking at and the broad scheme of the market, so you don't get lost in your trading, and then you can kind of have an avenue or a plan to follow going forward. So if we're looking at the movement so far, this is actually from a lesson that we did in Discord, but I want to go over where we're at. You can still clearly see that we are in a downtrend. You can, expanding, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But you can still see you are in a downtrend. Now, if you look at where we're going and what our target has to be here, in my opinion, I think we have to be aiming towards, somewhere closer towards the 12.4, 12.1 range on Nasdaq, going into, SPY, possibly 410. Maybe 408, being topside pressure, right? That has to be a massive level that we're going to be looking forward to. Now, if we come back into a shorter time frame here just to see where, ultimately we have upside to, from a supply and demand standpoint, you can see that we are over the 4-hour and 1-day supply level here on SPY specifically. We'll go into, Nasdaq here in a second, but we can clearly see what's happening here. And then we're, looking very strong. That's what I want to highlight is, you come here because I'm unbiased and I like to tell people what's specifically happening here and what we need to be watching. Okay, that leads me to my next point. Before we go any further, I have to ask you to consider doing two things: liking and subscribing. Every single day I make content for you, going over the market and specific news surrounding. Typically Monday through Friday, it's more about the day trading aspect and what's happening as far as news. But right now I'm doing more of a broad viewpoint because, again, I want to do and kind of shift the demand of what we're doing here on the weekends, specifically here on the channel. Let's get back to it. Now, as you jump in here, you can see we got over this massive level. This was huge. I mean, really, you can drag this all the way down to roughly 391 and 395 was a massive level. But just highlighting just the bullet points of where we were at the top, where we were getting rejected the most, you can see we've mounted that area and now pushing up even higher. I would not consider this level a supply level because you are just so broad there as well. Now, if we come to our next level, it's more than clear to see where, we have that next level of resistance near 410, 411. Now, I also want to highlight that you have the beginning of this gap to, start to be filled. So when we go to this level, this will be a tough level to get above. 403.1, 403.5 roughly is going to be tough on SPY. So getting over this leads us to the upside of 410. And again, why does this matter? Is this a day trading point of view? No, it's to show you where we're at, because I believe this trend will be tough to get out of. But there is potential to get above this. And I think, again, I've been ultimately too bearish maybe on the channel. I still do believe new lows can be established and we will see another downturn. I want to make that really clear. But if we look at something like Dow, and again, this is, SPY and ES and the overall trend going on here, we can see that Dow has clearly broken out of that downtrend, if you will, right? It's broken out of this. It's extremely clear. Nasdaq, which is the one that I'm currently trading for the upside, is the one that I believe has the most potential for more upside, right? That's just based on my beliefs, how we're moving, and ultimately just the target of where I see us going here, right? I want to make that extremely clear. This is what I'm looking at based on where we're at here. And we can go to something like the weekly and get a better viewpoint, but I still believe you have more room to that upside, going to 12.1, 12.2 roughly on NQ, which would lead Qs to something like roughly the 300, 301 target, you know, almost 20, 14, 15 points of upside on Qs, right? These are big points we need to look at and things you have to be watching. Now, again, am I going blindly into this week to the call side? No, I am protecting myself. I've made a substantial amount over the past week trading to the upside since CPI, since we were waiting on that information, but I'm still trading right now from a day trading aspect, going towards that upside, coming to the specific level. But I do want people to be prepared and just to know that this level will in fact be big. It will be important because, you know, this downtrend so far has been tried, you know, it has been tested, and so far it hasn't done so well. You haven't got too many daily holds above this on the weekly chart either. So these are things you have to be looking at, and you're definitely getting up to that level 300, 301 going into this week. Clear target has to be there. Now, when you look at overall information, when we get into what we're going to be looking at as far as news catalysts this week, I do want to talk about that. And I do want to do this more often here on the channel, but really as we go into the beginning of the week, the factors that are going to affect specifically the movement that we're seeing on the market, and main bullet points for everyone to be watching. And I know maybe we haven't done the best job at it here, but I want to highlight things so we can help you develop a plan during your trading week, because that has to be a focal point, especially if you're a day trader. So when we look at this, and I'm coming back to reality of saying this is day trading, because you have to understand the broad scale movement if you're going to day trade, in my opinion, because you have to have, you know, a policy or a target of where you're trading that upside to, and then ultimately where a breakout factor occurs where you're really seeing maybe we are in a bull market. Maybe there is an actual pivot, you know, as far as those lines. So when we look at the week, there's three main factors we need to look at, and it's going to be pretty simple. I rank them in my order of importance. So number one is going to be Tuesday. You do have your PPI. I do want to highlight, every time you have a positive or a negative, should I say, CPI, PPI always comes out as a positive. So if CPI has missed bad, hypothetically, if we look at past trends in the market, you can go look for SPY for yourself, basically going back all the way through March, I believe. You can see that we've dipped from CPI and then we usually bottom out around PPI because it doesn't report as bad. Now, this does not mean that PPI is going to beat, so I want to make that extremely clear and known. That's why this is on the list. This is why this is maybe one of the factors that is subject to change that you need to be aware of. So if we look at PPI, very important going into Tuesday. I wouldn't say it's the most important, but it's going to be the closest data to us. So it might be the most important to you today because you might just be focused on trading into tomorrow. That's gonna be very important. Now, you do know I love my China stocks right now, and if you're not following on Twitter, I've definitely been mentioning these quite a bit. So on Twitter, I highlighted one of the top China stocks and just how beat up they are in comparison to the rest of the market. Go check that out. Link is down below. So China COVID policy. They are set to possibly be reducing their China lockdown procedure, which is really big for Boeing also, because if you don't know, about 50% of, I believe, their airliners come from the China system of what they're doing over there with airlines. So you do need to understand that this is definitely hurting them. If you don't know, Boeing has been expanding and doing more sales. And I think if China does a reopening policy, you could see more sales going specifically towards the China area. And if you look at what's happening to Dow, I do want to make this really clear also, right? We look at stocks like CAT, right? If you look at CAT, you know, you had your 52-week low here, roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about a month and a half ago, roughly. Okay, within a month and a half, you're almost back to all-time highs within $10. Looking at Boeing's chart on the weekly time frame, I'm just telling you, it's one of the most impressive charts there is. I also posted it on Twitter so you can see what I'm looking at here. You can see the clear downtrend, basically going back through 2019. You're breaking above it and above a local supply level also. It's a tough chart. You have to acknowledge where you're at. And ultimately, you have to acknowledge you have a lot more room to go here if this does continue. So again, I believe the China COVID policy could weigh right into this, as well as other Chinese stocks. Again, I mentioned those on Twitter also. Now, number two, Thursday jobs data. This is probably the most important because if we talk about why we're bouncing on the market, it's all about the idea of hypothetically the Fed pivoting, right? And that's not me saying that the Fed should pivot because I don't believe we should. I believe there's a lot of question marks and a lot of concerns on the broad scale market. So you need to understand that. But Thursday jobs report will give you a clear indicator. If we have a CPI beat or CPI comes in good for the economy, and then we have jobs data come in good as well, what we need to see is unemployment slowly rising, not in the private sector specifically, but across the broad scale of the market. So that's things you need to be thinking about. We need to see that come in. Fed rhetoric, we always got to pay attention to this, and you have to highlight it with the importance of jobs data because you want to see what the Fed says in comparison to what they said last week, because you saw them saying this could possibly justify a pivot, right? And again, I know people are coming here and they're saying, Tyler, how do you expect new lows, but you expect them to say they're pivoting? Okay, look, as we get into some more information here on the video, you'll see as long as what I mean is why I could still see downside happening in the market based on the data and specifically what's driving us to actually fall in CPI. But it's important to hear this rhetoric because what they say does impact the market immediately in the short term. So that is important. And obviously supply and demand levels, which I'm going to target you. And you can see these levels played out perfectly last week. And I'm just saying, right, this is not to say that I'm right, everyone's wrong, or my charting method is best. You know, a lot of people use supply and demand. I recommend it. It's just simplistic and it makes things a lot more clear for myself, but I believe these levels will help you just in your trading for this week and most likely for the coming weeks also, because I think these levels are major coming up right now. Now, before we go into anything else further, I do want to highlight what I was talking about as far as seeing potentially more downside, and I've covered this already, and I thank you, Discord member Joffrey, for posting this. It was extremely helpful, and I think it highlights all the bullet points we've talked about here. If we look at the main concerns when it comes to inflation, what's going up? Gas was one of the main drivers when we saw the most bearish CPI reports and inflation reports, correct? That was the main concern. Since that happened, you've seen overall CPI go down, right? It's very clear. You can see that, right? Since it pivoted to the highest point. Now, since then, what's also been going higher? Rents. Now, again, I have talked about this specifically. Rent months to go down in value. When you're seeing rents decrease, cost of living decrease, that will usually happen around November into January. Why? Because it's holiday months, end of the year, tax season, etc. Those are main reasons why cost of living typically goes down as far as rents pricing to try to drive new people into multifamily residential specifically. Now, usually see those heat back up around February going into the end of the summer. Why? Because income tax season starts, coming in. So I get mine in around, February and March. And then, going into the summer months is just a hot month typically to flip into finding new properties. That's just the way it is. You can go look at, any books you want when it comes to multifamily. I believe you'll see some good answers there. So that's what I'm looking at here. But you're seeing that track up into the winter months, which is concerning for myself and shows that the housing market isn't as fragile as we thought. And I know people are going to say, well, Tyler, you said multifamily, but you can also look at single family rentals as well going up rapidly also, which is still justifying the prices of homes, which is why I don't think we're going to see a housing market crash besides in specific states as far as the higher end tier. When it comes to states like Texas, Florida, I just don't see those ones getting hurt, right? The southern states with more stable economies that don't rely or fluctuate or is quote unquote as volatile as the others. Now, we have to anticipate as we run out of reserves, as we have this maybe gridlock in the Senate, as we have more Republicans in the House. Maybe Democrats' policies don't go through. Maybe there's struggle. Maybe we don't get rid of more reserves. I don't know. I can't give that answer. But what I have to question is where gas is right now, where energy cost is. I have to say, I don't know if it can get much cheaper. If this starts to expand, you have to anticipate everything else to go up also. And that combined with rent could be detrimental. So that's where I believe the fundamental error in the market is right now. Personal opinion, could be wrong. Now, when we look at information on this week, I do want to talk about it. Now, again, Tuesday, that's when you start to get information. Monday, not too important. I think you have room for upside going into Monday. PPI, obviously, very important. Going into Wednesday, you have manufacturing and retail spending and retail sales. I think retail sales will be fine, personally, going into holiday season, personal opinion. And then Thursday, this is where I think you could get bearish personally. You have housing permits, you have unemployment information, and then Kashikari, which is one of the most bearish Feds or hawkish, if you will, on the market. So as we look at the chart, I do want to say a few things. Now, before you get out of here, and I know you might be a little sad that I'm not giving you my favorite picks or this or that. You can go watch Friday's video if you want. I would be clearly targeting this level. And this has to be in your range of where you're targeting for NQ, ES, Dow to all go. Okay, this is when I expect a slowdown, and this times out pretty perfectly with the 12-1, 12-2 region, and I think that just makes logical sense into Thursday for myself. Again, I don't expect PPI to be bad, but if it is, obviously, I'll just make this change, make the pivot on the market, but that's what I'm looking at right now. I do see upside potential into this week, but down the road, we need to see if we actually start to break out of this channel. Again, this is a weekly time frame. This is a massive level on these charts. Dow, again, you can already see breaking out of this level. Going into something like ES, you can see where it's going. It's getting dangerously close also. You can still see here, right? Very clearly, you're coming to this range right now, right? You still have a lot more room, almost 100 points on the upside on ES to really hit the top of this trend roughly. You can even move it down a little bit just to give you a little bit of wiggle room. You can still see there's still plenty of upside. So I want to just make sure people can see the broad chart before we necessarily quote unquote have to get a pullback, right? Even from a technical standpoint, not from a fundamental Fed pivot standpoint, both sides of this. And these are the major concerns I believe we have to be paying attention to when you're looking at the market for this week. Now, before we go any further, let me look at DXY and the yields. Now, this is probably one of the most grotesque charts that we've seen in a while, and I've been posting these on Twitter, but for Thursday and Friday, I don't think I really updated too much, so I do want people to understand that. But we can see that we broke through our massive level at 109, which was the previous high that we had established from July. It was a massive level. You can see it held for a while, and the dollar just started tanking, right? So the next level I have mentioned is going to be about the 105 to 109, 105.9 area. Tough level. After that, you have a little bit of a low to around 104.9, and then after that, it gets even darker to 103. I do want to highlight though, this means though, if we start to drop on the economy, the dollar has a lot of room to go. So this could really start heating up some of the drop to come in the near future, because we've seen how we've been tracking the dollar and the movement on the economy also. Now, when you go to something like yields, these are something you have to be watching really close. We saw we were making higher lows, and this made sense. We didn't think that this would break, this trend would break, until we got some quote-unquote Fed pivot type of news. And CPI did that structurally. And we can see we're dropping here. Again, I want to see if 30-year holds the 4% level on the yields. Very big. Now, when we look at what's happening with the inversion going in here, you can also see we're right on that line. If you zoom out, I have not touched this. It's been here for a while here on the channel, and you can see we're riding this trend right now. Very much so, coming dangerously close to breaking down. Now, I do want to highlight, it's not going to be exact. I just want to see how much we start coming down. If we start breaking down to like the 90% level on the inversion, I'd be concerned and be like, man, possibly we're seeing a reversal. Now, on VIX also had a big drop. You dropped from the 23-24 level. It has to go both ways. If I expect big movement to come from these levels and we drop through them, then I have to acknowledge the market looks really solid, okay? These are just viewpoints you have to acknowledge when it's coming in. I can't invalidate my statement or go back on it. So if I'm looking at this and I say it's a monster level, we might get a great bounce from this, and we don't, and we just sell right through it, then there's a concern there. There's a concern that it's adjacent to the theory that we may have had. So if we expected a bounce and didn't get it, it might tell us that the opposite, in fact, may be coming, and that's what we need to kind of prepare for. So these are all things we're looking for. I'll have more information coming out this week with stocks I'm loving. If you want to see the stocks that I was talking about, that I loved a lot, I had a live stream yesterday, but if you didn't catch the live stream, you can watch on Friday's video, because I covered specifically the stocks I'm liking, and I'll tell you right now what they are. I love Costco, I love Tesla, I love Baba. Those are some of my best plays I think on the week and have the most potential. Only play I have right now is Baba, and it's a smaller position, but I'm waiting to see how we come out Monday morning before I go too heavy, because I don't like swinging too many things right now.